Great. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I am the director of the graduate programs in sustainability at Bard College in New York. And with my colleagues, David and Tobias, we are helping lead and head up this call for global participation in climate education as part of a worldwide teach-in on climate and justice, which is scheduled for on or around March 29th of this year. That's coming up soon. And if you're new to this conversation, just learning about the teach-in today, it doesn't have to be on March 29th. You can push it as late as April 20th or May 1st if you need a little bit more time to prepare. So actually, why don't we get, if you wouldn't mind, in the chat, if you are new to this conversation or here for the first time, that would help us have a sense of who's around and how much information we should be giving you about the teach-in before we get started.
I think we do several new people even.
All right, good.
Yeah, so you should give a...
But it's great to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us where you're coming from, if you represent a school, what school that is, and what part of the world you're joining from, just to get to know everybody on the chat.
If I can also request that everyone, if you are part of a school or education community, if you can include the ages of the students that you typically work with, that would be helpful.
Yep. Okay. So what I want to do is introduce the teach-in project, and then we're going to hear from Liza Cochran, who is with Write the World, and is going to be helping us think about writing as a climate solution. Or as a big part of climate solutions. So let me dive in. And what I'd like to do is give you just a tour of our website, really as a way to provide some background as to the project. And again, by way of introduction, I think probably for this audience, we don't need to be too focused on the why of the teach-in. As some of you may have heard, as you come onto this call, we're headed into El Nino next year, very likely, which means we are very likely going to break through yet another ceiling in terms of global warming. You know, it's just been a devastating year for so many people. Hearts, and my heart's still connected to all of those people in Pakistan who were wiped out by a flooding that, you know, overwhelmed a third of the country and displaced 30 million people. So we know that time is short, and as educators, it really is our obligation and responsibility to really engage, and in particular work to engage, you know, not just the students who are taking climate-related courses, but everyone on our campuses. And so the idea of the worldwide teach-in as a project, and we've been around for 4 years now, is really kind of a stronger together kind of focus, that we're all engaged in various kinds of climate education, but if we can focus our attention on a given day or a given week or a given month, that really accelerates engagement and provides us all motivation and inspiration from one another. And we had some truly inspiring conversation last week from fabulous teach-ins that were held last year in a number of places around the world, and news of other ones to come. So this is our website. It's just worldwideteachin.org. If you go to our main page here, you'll see that there's a little 1-minute video explainer, which I will play for you right now.
Your worldwide teach-in will mobilize the power of educators and students and empower a generation of fighting to stabilize the climate and advance climate justice.
We all need to get comfortable talking about climate all the time. The teach-in helps us do that.
The worldwide teach-in is a call to organizing events on campus or community on or around March 29th, 2023.
The key to successful teaching is relying on homegrown talent, not outside experts. The more local educators you involve directly from your school or community, the more people will attend the event.
They will do this gladly because they are really worried about climate change, just like you.
Our team is here to support you, but you have to step forward. Join us.
So we are here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. Up until the teaching day. Please find other people, tell other people about this project. It's the only way that we can really spread the word. We've got a 10-minute version of this video here, which goes into great detail on options and ways to engage your community, lots of teaching models. And if you go to Our Models page on our website, a lot of that will pop up. Lots of different approaches, lots of different ideas. This year we've added climate comedy and climate theater. We actually did a play competition this year. We have 40 submissions. We've got 3 really wonderful winning plays. They're sort of 5-minute plays. And so a very simple teach-in would be to hold a reading of some climate plays on your campus and discuss them. They're just 5 minutes long. You can do all 3 of them in an hour and have some really robust discussion. But lots of good ideas. We actually have a document that has what happened at all 350 teach-ins last year. So you can really get inspiration from what colleagues have done. So the main thing to know is that if you have not yet done this, you need to register your event. So if you click on register your event on our main page, it will pull up our interactive map. It's coming up right now. Please get your dot on the map. Let the world know that you are intending to participate in this project. And it really is what inspires everybody else to do it. And it also allows us to keep track of what's going on globally. So please, very simple, just register an event here. Your dot will pop up. We're, over 180 events, and we would like to get that number up significantly over the next month or so. So please, again, if you haven't registered, do it now. And help us find others. A teach-in doesn't have to be a big, expensive thing. It can be as simple as a faculty member or some students calling for, some discussion at lunchtime and having some tables. Small projects are fine at this stage, and we welcome any level of participation in the teach-in. It can be K-12 institutions, K-8, it can be high schools, it can be faith organizations, it can be businesses, as well as colleges and universities. That is really the coverage that I wanted to share today, at least initially. Let's see if there's any questions. I will say that Tobias and David and myself are eager to have one-on-one conversations with anyone who's interested. We've got on our website as well lots of great graphics and posters and pretty much everything you need to pull together an event pretty quickly. Let me stop my share and just see if we've got any questions, and then if not, David, I'll turn it over to you for our program today. But questions from anyone before we move into the conversation about writing the world? Oh, and I just got the pun. So the double meaning of that. So having said it out loud, we need to write the world, get it right. Any questions about the teaching? All right, I'm sure they've come during the conversation, so please, let's have that. We'll be here for the next 50 minutes. So David, you want to take it over?
Sure. So thank you, Evan, and thank you all for being with us. And just to let you know, we are recording this, and we will send you the recording, the link to the recording, and also any resources that are included in the chat. So if you have something you want to share with your colleagues, please do that. So I'm really happy to have Liza Cochran from Write the World coming to us from central Vermont in the snow. I'm jealous. And we've been working with Liza and Write the World for several months now, because we know that written communication is really essential to not only education about climate change, but the climate solutions. And when we tend to think about climate education, people often think in terms of the physical sciences, but it's really our ability to communicate the scientific information, the cultural aspects, and other components of climate change and climate justice that are essential for us to right the world, to, as Eben says, to move from despair to repair. So I will turn it over to Liza Cochran. Liza, not Eliza, but Liza is a program officer with the organization Write the World, and she'll be leading us in a workshop. So go ahead, Liza.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Eben and Tobias as well. It is wonderful to be with all of you today, and on behalf of everyone at Write the World, we're thrilled to participate in the teach-in. We'll be talking more about that in a moment, and to have this opportunity to share some ideas with you on how writing can foster meaningful climate engagement among students and communities, as David said. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And this webinar is, as you know, designed as a mini workshop. So we're really hoping to offer some hands-on understanding of what your students might experience when writing about climate change. The content of what we'll cover today is designed with educators in mind, but the idea is to put you in your students' shoes, experiencing how the writing process can influence or change the way you relate to this crisis in some shape or form. So before we dive in, take a moment to reflect on this quote from one of the lead authors of the latest IPCC report. You may be familiar with the work of Joelle Gergis already. She wrote the book Humanity's Moment, which I highly recommend. And she says, we need artists, writers, poets, and filmmakers. They can dismantle the walls of numbness. So as David's saying, this is a sentiment coming from one of the lead climate scientists in the world. And she is, of course, speaking about the power of writing to influence its readers. But what we'll focus on in this webinar is the power of writing to dismantle the walls of numbness, as she says, within the writer, and the engagement and action that is ignited as a result. So before we move on, I would love for you to just pop in the chat, and I'll stop sharing so we can see each other here. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple bullet points in the chat for everyone to see. And the first thing is for you to pop in the chat and share with us, what are your first thoughts that come to mind when you hear climate writing? How would you define this term? So go ahead and share with us anything that comes to mind. How do you define this term, climate writing? And I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. So it's whatever really comes to mind, top ahead here. Great, I see some responses coming in. And then the next question is, what is your own relationship to climate writing? So you may be like a professional climate journalist, for all I know, or you may be someone who's designing climate curriculum, and that's what climate writing means to you. You may dabble in climate poetry. You may not consider yourself anywhere close to this term or this activity, climate writing. So just jot down in the chat Sorry, I didn't realize that the questions hadn't come through on my end. Yeah, so what climate writing looks like to you in your life, if anything? Great, I'm seeing advocacy emails, advocacy writing, nonfiction and fiction, technical, persuasive, emotional, personal reflections. Awesome, these are great. Okay, and hopefully you're seeing my screen again. So this is a great mix of responses, and I want you to know up front that engaging in climate writing requires zero prior experience. So you do not need to be an expert in the science of climate change or a professional author by any means to write about this topic in a meaningful way. To start off, we'll give you a quick roadmap of where we're going in our half an hour or so together today. We'll begin with a quick overview of Write the World, who we are, what we do, including our teach-in event and climate writing initiative. And then we'll look more closely at younger generations' call to action for us educators. I'll give you some examples of writing's power to engage students in climate action from our experience at Write the World. And then we'll step into the shoes of our students for a mini class activity in quotes, and have some time at the end for sharing about this experience of what it's like to be a student, as well as to consider some transference and next steps. Write the World is a not-for-profit organization made up of tens of thousands of students, high school age students, so 13 to 19, and educators from all around the world. And we're in over 100 different countries, I think up to 125 or so. It's a free platform to use and a place where young writers find a sense of community by responding to prompts, participating in writing groups, publishing their work, entering competitions. You can exchange comments and peer reviews on the platform within the community. So literally, receiving feedback from your writing from other young people across the world, participating in workshops, all kinds of writing related activities. And then teachers can draw on the prompts and resources and lesson plans for their own classroom communities, or they can actually create a private classroom on the platform. Our teaching event will engage our global community of young writers in climate writing, but the idea is to simultaneously support educators in implementing climate writing in their own classrooms and communities. So from March 24th to April 7th, that 2-week period, we will post 3 different writing prompts up on the site, one in poetry, one in flash fiction, and one in advocacy writing. And the prompts, including writing guidelines for the writers, will be up for 2 weeks. After that window, we will award a prize in each category to be announced on Earth Day. And we're really excited. Actually, David, I haven't shared this news with you yet, that we have the young climate activist Alexandria Villaseñor serving as the guest judge. She's the co-founder of the U.S. Youth Climate Strike and the founder of Earth Uprising. So she's 17. She is just like an extremely impressive young person, but very cool to actually have this leader in the field who is the same age of the participants. For educators, our teach-in and associated awards, it's intended to support your own teaching curricula in whatever way makes sense to you, including the Make Climate a Class and Teach 10 Hours for Climate initiatives. Each prompt in those 3 genres have lesson plans, standards alignment resources, and we'll post those for educators. And I'll also email those out to this group the end of this week or beginning of next week. And they can really, even if you do not teach high school age students, that 13 to 19 age range, that is, all of this is very applicable, can still be very applicable to you and your students or classroom communities. The writing prompts and resources that we will pass along to you really can be adapted for any age from, I've used similar prompts with 10-year-olds all the way up through graduate students and adults. And the idea is that you can take whatever piece of any of this speaks to you and adapt it for your writing community now or in the future. We've been engaging students in writing about climate change for almost 10 years now and treat this initiative as part of a key social tipping intervention. In other words, holding education as a critical component of social transformation and a critical mechanism for altering norms and values around climate change. Through our curriculum and programming, we really position the climate crisis as relevant to all facets of a young person's future. So, we do that through putting climate-related prompts up on the site, holding climate-related writing competitions, offering environmental and climate writing workshops, and we treat this as a community initiative, so something that's done collectively and in collaboration. Climate writing is still considered niche in at least the literary world, but of course it's not niche at all. We instead call it climate writing across the curriculum and think of it as something that can be a part of every genre and every class subject. And what we all know now, of course, is that young people really want to engage with the subject of climate change, and they want us as educators to engage with them. A sense of anxiety and distress is felt acutely by younger generations, and where there used to be a hesitancy for educators, and we had some of that in our early days at Write the World, hesitancy about bringing a topic as overwhelming as climate change to the consciousness of our students. What's become clear is that by engaging with climate change in our classrooms, we are overwhelmingly meeting teens where they're already at. You can see this reflected in study after study, such as this one, which surveyed 10,000 young people from around the world on how they feel about climate change and government's response to it. And that when we, as adults and educators, fail to do that, when we fail to really meet students where they're already at, there is this double damage. So there's distress about climate change itself, and then distress caused by the disjunction between what they feel, young people feel acutely already, and the level of response or acknowledgement from adults. There's, of course, Greta Thunberg's now famous quote from her speech in Davos, and another stirring articulation I came across recently of this dynamic comes from the youth climate activist Shia Bastida, and she wrote, "It feels like we're rooted in awareness while the adults around us live in obliviousness. Nothing changes when we stay in a state of unbotheredness." So the question for us then is, how can we as educators support young people in what they're already inclined to do, which is to care deeply about the crisis that we're all living through and what will define their futures. And what we've seen at Write the World is that writing about climate change has the power to endow young people with a sense of agency as it fosters both action and hope. So it aligns their inner experience with the outer world. It frames the changing climate as a crisis we all have agency to address. And perhaps most importantly, it fosters connection and community. And both Eben and David spoke to this. That really is what allows for sustained engagement rather than feelings of hopelessness to take hold. We at Write the World have the privilege of doing this through exposure. So we are reflecting the importance of student voice and experience back to them by broadcasting their writing out into the world. Poetry and essays about climate change by our young writers have been featured by The New Yorker, Public Radio International, featured in a book we published that was blurbed by Elizabeth Colbert, guest judged, and commented on by Bill McKibben and Jamie Margolin. So all of this is a way to really validate their perspective and their voice. But writing in any community, large or small, and I think smaller classroom communities have the benefit of closeness and intimacy, has the power to connect writers to the issue while also connecting them to each other through a sense of audience and shared care. As Amitav Ghosh reminds us, a sense of connection, community, and collective action is exactly what we need at this time. And this is, of course, intrinsically valuable, but also from that sense of connection, other forms of engagement can transpire. In this way, writing can be that seed of connection that sets off a pathway of action. So starting with connection and that fueling motivation and providing a sense of agency and planting those seeds of hope, and then that creating that sustained or continued engagement over time. And just one example of this is a young writer in our community, Vani Dadu. She's now in her early 20s, but when she was a teenager on Write the World, she wrote about climate change through personal essays and poetry. And when she transitioned into her college years and started at university, she reflected on her experience at Write the World and how that engagement with climate through writing has influenced her course of study. And she said, "I will be studying engineering, but this experience makes me more sensitive toward climate change. I know that in the future, I will make an effort to study sustainability more deeply. I've realized that all these years of writing on Write the World has made me so much more receptive to new ideas and confident in my writing skills, and even understand others through their writing. It is a privilege to write for an issue that affects us all." But if connection is the starting point, where does that come from? How do we get students to write and to start feeling connected? In other words, as the poet Joy Graham puts it, it is one thing to understand what is happening, and is quite another to awaken to it. The youth climate leader Mariah Rosenweig said recently that for her, it starts with pausing and noticing what's around us. She says, I'll sit myself down on the ground and really connect to my senses, especially breath. That will make you more aware of the world around you. And then the more you're aware, the more you're going to care. And the more you care, the more likely you are to do something about it. So that is this, this pathway reflected there in her own reflection of her process. So today we're going to follow Mariah's lead. We're going to go on a journey, an imagined journey, in which we, as she says, sit ourselves down on the ground and pay attention to what's beneath us, to our sense of place, to our senses. The framework up on the screen is used by the All We Can Save project, and I want to draw your attention to it because it represents, I think, this critical interlocking relationship between courage and truth and solutions, and that writing about this topic, writing about how this topic impacts us, requires us to be courageous. So thank you in advance for whatever courage you've mustered to participate today. So step one is to reflect. So what I want you all to do is take just a minute or two to jot some notes down in response to these questions. You can, jot things down with pen and paper. You can type out your response, but to actually really, again, this is your chance to put yourself in the student's shoes, in your student's shoes. So question one, what place do you go to or imagine or remember if you can't go there physically in times of distress or uncertainty? And list 2 to 3 specific places that are in or connected to the natural world in some way. So it might be your backyard or your front stoop. It might be a bluff where you can take in the view of the sea, a specific tree along your street, a path in the woods. So take one more minute to list at least 2, if not more, of those specific places in the physical world. And now from that list, choose one and close your eyes for a moment and do your best to transport yourself there. So in your mind, allow yourself to actually be in that physical place. What does the air feel like on your face? Is there a particular smell? What is the quality of the light? Are you sitting or standing? What sounds do you hear? What's the temperature? And now you can open your eyes and take another few minutes to respond to this mini prompt. Bring your chosen place to mind. And now transport us there with 3 vivid and telling descriptions using a different sense for each. So again, you're just writing, 2 to 3 sentences, 1 sentence per sense. Just to choose 2 or 3. And there's some examples written out there. So perhaps it's the feeling of the wind in the desert that defines this place for you. The view of the shoreline in a storm, the sound of dogs or owls, the smell of the forest duff, the sea salt, or maybe the absence of smell after the snow has coated your city block. But do your best to pick details that are particular and specific to this place, and then bring them to life with fresh language. Take one more minute. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. So now we're going to take a few minutes to listen to how one person, the writer Terry Tempest Williams, writes about the Western US landscape, specifically Utah, where she and her family have lived for generations. Williams, in this interview, is speaking with a reporter from the New York Times, Bianca Gaver, about the wildfires that devastated parts of the Western US in the summer and early fall of 2020. And we're going to listen to just two very short segments. We'll jump in when Williams is talking about her experience living through fires in the past, and then her current experience in Utah as the skies have filled with smoke and ash. And then we'll move to the section in which Williams reads a passage she's written called An Obituary for the Land, which really is an obituary for the way that humans have been living, and a rallying call for a changed way. So notice in these passages that we'll hear how closely her grief is aligned with a commitment, a vow to fight for change, and the relationship between grief and writing and action. Let me know if for some reason this audio doesn't come through. Okay, I'm about to start the first one.
And, you know, I just went outside and all of the patio furniture is covered in ash. And, you know, you just think that ash, you know, those are trees, those are bodies, that's fur, that's feathers. It's everything. And it's, you know, we're covered in it. And anyone who says they're fine, they are dead to this world that is really dying. And grief, I feel like it's a raven on my shoulder. I just walk with it every day. And that is the truth.
And then this is the second segment.
Do you feel comfortable reading some of what you wrote today?
Yes, I do. Put this down and get it. Okay. Bianca, what part do you want me to read?
Maybe toward the end, where the part where you directly address the obituary.
Okay. The obituary will be short. The time came and they died to the old ways of being. Good riddance. It was time, a terminal disease where humans put themselves at the center of the universe, and in so doing, have been dead to the world that is alive. To the power of these burning, illuminated Western lands who have shaped our character, inspired our souls, and restored our belief in what is beautiful and enduring, I will never write your obituary. Because even as you burn, you are throwing down seeds that will sprout and flower. Trees will grow and forests will rise again as living testaments to how one survives change. Let this be a humble tribute, an exaltation, an homage, an open-hearted eulogy to all we are losing to fire, to floods, to hurricanes and tornadoes, and the invisible virus that has called us all home and brought us to our knees. We are not the only species that lives and loves and breathes on this planet called Earth. May we raise a fistful of ash to all the lives lost that it holds. Grief is love. How can we hold this grief without holding each other? I will mark my heart with an X made of ash that says, the power to restore life resides here. The future of our species will be decided here, not by facts, but by love and loss. Let us cry every day like rain in the desert. Hand on my heart, I pledge of allegiance to the only home I will ever know.
Okay, so the next step is to write. So we'll take about 7 minutes or so. And then what I'd like you to do is to take the seeds of what you've already written about this place of refuge and begin a Pledge of Allegiance poem, whatever that means to you, inspired by this quote from Tempest Williams. She says at the very end, "Penned on my heart, I pledge of allegiance to the only home I will ever know." So in your mind, go back to that place of refuge that you've already described and write your own Pledge of Allegiance poem. And of course, you won't finish. This is just the beginning, but we'll take about 6 or 7 minutes right now to start. Have about 2 more minutes before we come back together.
You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm going to stop you there and put in the chat a few options for what you might share with the rest of us. And if you have the ability to turn your videos on, we'd love to see you. It's always nice to actually see one another as we're sharing, but if not, that is of course fine too. So your options are to potentially read a line of something you've written today, or maybe instead you'll share a bit about what this writing process was like for you. You might simply finish this sentence. I used to think ... now I think ... or finally just sharing something that you discovered throughout this process. So take a moment to decide what you would like to share of those options or something else. And Farah, could we start with you?
Did you want me to share in the chat or verbally?
You can share verbally if you feel up for it. If not, you're welcome to share in the chat.
Yeah.
If you can just, if everyone can begin by just sharing their name and where you are, and then something you'd like to share, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm Farah Grant. I teach at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. I teach Intro to Sustainability, and then I'm also part of other curriculum development projects, both at UNO and with mentee faculty in Pakistan. And so I'm looking at doing some sort of reflection activity like this between my students here in Omaha and then students in Pakistan, and them being able to read each other's work. And when I look at this stuff, it always feels like really heart-wrenching and emotional to me.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'd be happy to chat further sometime just to brainstorm or
yeah,
any way I could as you develop that programming. It sounds
I love that. I love that idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Rosin or Rosin, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Are you with us? Hi.
Rosin is correct. Thank you for inviting me. I teach business and marketing, so I'm a little bit more straightforward, and I have to admit this was a challenge, but it is a nice exercise. So I have to admit that for me, it's not necessarily only a place, but I have a little son, and I found that spending time with him and outdoors, we are lucky to live close to a city park, takes worries away and helps refocus on what's important. And actually sustainability, because of him, has also become important. Basically, it's as long as we're healthy and as long as we don't deteriorate the environment for the people we care about and we want to leave something for them, well, this is the motivation, and this is what helps me kind of refocus and think about what is important, and then maybe reevaluate what is not necessarily but bothers us during the day.
Thank you, Rosen. Yes, and you bring up, an important point, I think, which is that this idea of allegiance, or a pledge of allegiance, is, we started today with place and rooting ourselves in a physical place, but I have 2 young kids, and there is nothing more motivating to me than their future, and that perspective of I pledge allegiance when I think of them. That could be the seed to begin with a writing exercise like this.
Thank you for putting a very nice wrapper on what I said.
No, of course.
Thank you.
Sarah Ramirez.
Hi, yes, I am a current climate action fellow at the University of Riverside, and I'm actually on my way there. But right now, just thinking about pledging alliance or allegiance to not only my inner voice, but also my body, my health, and in that, pledging to the earth and to helping its bodies of forest and land, and thinking also about urban planning and how we can help urban communities have more greenery, and thinking about environmental racism as well. So that's all just in my mind right now.
Wow. So much. You have maybe a collection of poetry in your mind. Thank you for articulating that so beautifully, and I would love to see what comes of it for you.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited.
Yeah, thank you. Callie, let's go to you. Oh, I see in the chat you've just responded. Great. Yeah, Callie's just writing, I'm new to Write the World. This is Callie's second day at Write the World. I'm so happy you could come and join us today, Callie. I remembered more about my place than I thought I would, since it was a childhood memory, and revisiting that place in my mind brought out more emotions than I expected. Proof of the impact nature can have on us. Yeah, I think that's why, rooting yourself or rooting your students in a physical place, whether it's a physical place that has to do with the natural world as we did today, or not, it could be any physical place, because climate, of course, impacts everything and everywhere. But that it's amazing how the writing process can bring things to the surface for us and bring those memories and details to the surface. Daniel, let's go to you.
Daniel usually doesn't have good internet connections.
Okay.
So I don't think we're going to be able to hear him.
Okay. Yeah, and Daniel, if you want to put something in the chat for us to read instead, please feel free to. And Kathleen, how about you?
Oh, hi, I'm here. Thanks. I really enjoyed that. A little daunting, but I saw the value of that time you gave us to first reflect and then write down some responses. I am not a poet at all, and yet I know that once this is finished, I'll continue thinking of. I felt what I wanted to say, but I couldn't quite find the word to do it. I'm a climate change education consultant, and am used to dealing with persuasive language and working with non-fictional climate information for teachers and how they can communicate that to children. So during that time, I started this piece that I'll read, but don't have any high expectations. Mm-hmm. I pledge allegiance to the wilds, the majestic trees and the bluest of skies, to the oblivious creatures, large and small, that take each day at a time. I pledge allegiance to the wilds, to the peaceful gentling of sound and pace, slowing us down to breathe more deeply, to love each moment of life more fully. I pledge allegiance to the wilds with gratitude and love, and our future in your hands and in mine.
Wow, you are a poet. What are you talking about? That was beautiful. And I'm amazed that that came out in, our 6 or 7 minutes. That's really stunning, Kathleen. I love the repetition and the specificity of the details and just all of your language choices.
We're very fortunate here in upstate New York to have beautiful places to walk. So there are some other retired teachers and myself who go out for full day hikes every Friday. As long as it's above freezing, we're out there. So it was easy to imagine the beautiful forests of my area.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this webinar could be 3 hours long and we could go from step to step to step. The next step, of course, is to shift into more of that persuasive writing that you're talking about, but that these two genres or the multiple genres that make up climate writing are so connected. Each genre connects us to the topic in a different way and then gives, lends strength and credibility to being able to write something persuasive for a different sort of audience. And some of that will be reflected in the material that I send out as well. Jenna, last but not least, let's go to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm a former high school classroom science teacher, AP Environmental Science, Biology, Earth Science, and I'm now moving into adult facilitation spheres. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about translating content that's designed for teens to adults and how we really are all, when you get back to the roots of these places and connections, so many people go to their youth, and how I think that would be a really natural way to, harness some of the feelings that young people have and that adults have and that are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's true that, the power to traverse time in that way. There's a lot could come from that when addressing this topic. Yeah. Great. So I have one more, just like 1 minute question for you all. Before I do that, David or Tobias, anything from you? I wasn't sure if you participated in the activity or not.
Tobias, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I did participate. Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful. And I'll just be brief. But I was thinking my place was where I grew up in Los Angeles. So I was thinking about the beauty that can often be in a very kind of intense urban setting, as well as a pristine natural setting as well. So think about nature in that too.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly, you did sort of both get me out of my comfort zone in terms of doing this kind of writing, getting me into my comfort zone of thinking about a place and an activity, swimming across the lake at the YMCA camp in Pennsylvania. But I also just wanted to mention one business thing I put in the chat, that another type of writing is writing scripts for plays. And so, as Eben said, we did have 3 plays that we selected in our playwriting contest. And Farah, actually, one of them is by a Pakistani playwright, Mahahama, who is in the play is written in Urdu and also translated into English. And then another of our plays with the quote from Terry Tempest Williams is called After the Fire, which is written by a Native American, a East Salvador Chapman. So if you follow that link, and we'll send this all to you, you could maybe see about getting people to perform those short plays.
Fantastic.
Go ahead,
Thank you.
Liza. This is
Thank
great.
you. Okay, so last slide here is transference. And you know, this is intended for you as educators, but I also think that transference is such an important step with our students too. So part of this is just to model what you might do in the classroom setting. But the 3 questions for you to jot down responses to, well, actually, let me back up. So there's this great framework, self, us, and now, and we've really moved through this in half an hour together, like starting with something very specific and personal with our own memory of place, and then moving into a sphere that is more communal in the sense of you know, being in this experience together as a mini community. And then the last step is moving into now. So what do we do with this? And of course there is such urgency. So the 3 questions that I would love for you to answer is, and I'll pop these in a chat in a sec, or sorry, 2 questions. What would you like to remember from this experience for yourself? And how might you utilize this in the future? So what will you do with this? Will you finish the piece you started today? Will you design a writing activity for your students? Will you partake in one of the lesson plans that Write the World sends out, or send your students to participate in art teaching? Will you write a letter, an advocacy letter about something that is related to the place you wrote about? So what do you plan to do with this experience? And I see that we're really at the hour here, so I'm just going to finish by saying that I will get the email list from David and Tobias, or have them send out information to all of you, including not only a lesson plan for poetry for students, but the other 2 genres that we're focusing on as well for our teach-in, advocacy letter writing and fiction. What else? Oh, Write the World. If you are a high school teacher or teach students ages 13 to 19, please come to Write the World. And if you'd like, create a private classroom, a private group on the platform. One caveat is that this is 2 years in the making, but we are about to transition to a brand new website. It's happening in the next week or so. So what I will do is, after that happens, I'll send all of you information about, you know, how Write the World may serve you. But I think it makes sense to wait until after that. Thanks, Rosen. Before actually signing up at Write the World with an educator account. Okay, I know we're at time, but I'm also happy to stick around and answer questions if you have any.
Yeah, and I will just say, so thank you very much, Liza. This was great. And if you all want to keep hearing more, we're going to do another one tonight. Liza's going to be doing pretty much another version of this, or the same version of this workshop tonight at 9. So tell your friends, same link as now, or come again. And it looks like we did have one person, Kaka, who maybe just joined us. Maybe I don't know, maybe it was a time difference issue. So if you want to stay on and chat with us for a moment, you could do that. But again, just want to thank you all for joining, and we do hope you will join in writing and join in our effort towards global education about climate change, climate solutions, and climate justice.
Great. Thank you all.